Vladimir Putin's biggest problem is not that the Ukrainians are pushing back the Russian soldiers. The real danger is what mounting failures are doing to the Putin system. For this entire war, the Kremlin survived by keeping the failures compartmentalized. A military setback at the front, it could be buried under state propaganda. A strike inside of Russia was a temporary, localized glitch. Elite anxiety could be hidden behind the carefully curated image of control. But that formula begins to fail once the regime starts taking hits in every sector, all at the same time. And today, Russia is taking damage at the front, in the industrial rear, and in the information space. Ukraine is contesting gains and making it harder to present movement as durable. Precision strikes are dismantling the industrial base behind Russia's missile production. Moscow today is losing globally across multiple fronts, and all of this is putting structural strain on the Putin war machine. And that combination is far more dangerous than any single battlefield setback. A frontline problem changes once the factories behind the war are under pressure. And today, we are seeing that Ukraine is retaking occupied territory. Russia cannot contest it. And that's why today the elite anxiety is so high. This anxiety spreads once the insiders see that the failure is moving from the edges to the very center of the system. And that is where the real question begins. Can the regime absorb the pressure without starting to devour itself? Because right now, things look increasingly dangerous for the elites around Vladimir Putin. For Vladimir Putin, he has never had a more dangerous time before. My name is Dr. Jason Smart. I'm a Kiev Post special correspondent and a national security advisor. And I've spent 20 years studying the Putin regime. And one of the most interesting figures in that regime is a guy named Vladislav Surkov. Vladislav Surkov now is in the news because he is one of the older Putin people. He has been with him since 1999. He was in charge of things like manipulation, managing the competition, political stagecraft. But his generation that helped form the Putin regime, those who were there in the very beginning, today we see they're being pushed out. Today, the power is shifting, and that all underlines something else. That underlines that we are seeing the instability begin to spill out. But today, there's something else that's very important about him. We see that the elites close to Putin for many years are no longer able to maintain their positions. So what's going on? Why is it that there are people who have known Putin for 30 years, for 40 years, who are no longer able to sit at the Kremlin? Something is happening inside of Moscow, and it's not picked up much in the news, but it should be, because this sort of thing proves the Putin regime is far weaker than many people expect. And in fact, if Ukraine puts more pressure, we could easily see the breaking of the Putin regime. Help us get this to more people. Please like this video, hype this video, leave your comments below, and share this video with others. And if not already, please subscribe now and consider becoming a channel member today. So Surkov as a person is very important. He has known Putin for many years, and he was always considered to be an insider. In fact, recently a movie came out that was fictionalized, but it was based on his life. It was called The Wizard of the Kremlin. It did pretty badly looking at the reviews. But either way, it covered how this man was able to build up the idea of what is Putinism, to create the entire image. He's a political strategist, and he used it for the evil because he made a very functioning system that we see today that is able to manage politically everything that happens domestically. All of the political parties, the elections, the media, it's all controlled by a system created by Surkov. But he was also in charge of figuring out the Ukraine file. When the war first began, he was in charge of coming up with a plan for Donbass. The entire idea of Russia taking this region and making it look like it was local insurrectionists, that was his plan. But today, it seems that there are problems because there are reports coming out saying that he has fled. Now, what's interesting about this is not just if it's true or not, though he has not yet contested it. It's the fact that the story is coming out. Why is that? What does it indicate about the inner workings of the system? Well, first, we have to understand that the system is becoming truly weaker. We see that Ukraine is carrying out more attacks within Russia. We saw that just last week, the attacks inside of Crimea, then targeted things such as the Sopka 2 air target detection radar. We saw the 39N6, the Kosta 2E2, that radar system was also destroyed. Ukraine, time and again, is attacking positions in Crimea, such as command points. But when you attack these points, it means that Russia is no longer able to defend Crimea. And Russia cannot defend Crimea. It means the liberation of Crimea gets every day closer. And that's why people such as Surkov, it's possible they started to flee. It's possible they also fear what will happen next. As Putin starts to lose the ability to hold the front, we can expect there will be more people fleeing the regime. Consider this: Ukraine now claims it has taken 400 square kilometers, about 154 square miles, in the southeast of the country. Now, what we see is the counteroffensive has been successful. Russia is being pushed back, and right now we see that Russia is being forced to redeploy troops. But by redeploying troops, it means other parts of Russia are left undefended. It means that entire parts of the front are having their soldiers taken away from them. We've seen the soldiers from Donetsk, Dnipropetrovsk, Zaporizhia sectors all shifted around. But these redeployments show that Russia has to spend more money to stabilize the system, to stabilize what is going on in the front. A front that is becoming weaker by the day. Of course, it's not made any better by the lack of communication. The fact the government has made Telegram illegal. And as they're in the process of doing that, there's a very good news that came out. You remember the System Max, owned by a relative Vladimir Putin, the one that is supposed to replace all communication systems? Well, guess what? It has been categorically banned on the front lines because it presents, quote, security flaws that were judged, quote, severe enough to endanger the lives of Russian soldiers and officers. Now, just imagine this. This is the end-to-end encrypted system that the Kremlin said would replace everything that was currently being used. But today, it in fact raises the risk of command paralysis. Generals can no longer communicate with their subordinates. The subordinates can no longer communicate with their superiors. Nobody can communicate. All of this makes it more likely that Ukraine will take more territory. But we get back to Surkov with this exact point. Because Surkov, he understood how you could always use setbacks, how if you reframe them, they could be something that was not so bad. He was the sort of person that would come up with the justification to close down Telegram. But today, there is no Surkov. There is nobody like him near Putin. Putin's system has become tighter and tighter. Now, of course, a lot has come out recently about the Vladimir Putin tape on March 8th, showing that he was coughing. The fact that Vladimir Putin doesn't look very healthy. But why did that really come out? Was that something that just came out by accident? Or was that leaked? Because there's a lot of evidence that it was perhaps leaked. Why would that be? Well, for one, the infighting in the Kremlin is very real. It's very intense. And that infighting is leading to more people to realize there's something wrong. And the rot starts at the top. In the case of Russia, the people every day are seeing that things are not going well. It's very clear that Ukraine should not be making so many advances. Russia had always prized itself as having the world's greatest military. But look at the attacks that Ukraine carried out on Bryansk. Look at the attack on the Kremny L plant. That plant is so important for the Russians because it makes the control systems for the Russian missiles. Without that, you cannot have the microelectronics you need in order to have the missiles that you need for air defense, for the drones, for electronic warfare. All of this is lost due to Ukrainian strikes inside of Russia. So if you're somebody from the elites, if you're somebody watching this, how should you understand this? Should you think that Russia is winning? That things are getting better? Certainly not the case. How can you think that things will get better when for years you have people like Sergei Shoigu, who was the Minister of Defense? He spent more than 30 years close to Putin, but he was pushed out. His loyalty could no longer save him. Many people say now that his deputies have been arrested, that he is next. I would bet that it's unlikely that he actually goes to jail. He was simply too close to Putin. It wouldn't be a good look, so many photos, so many years together, Shoigu and Putin, that now one of them is behind bars. But for Putin, he realizes there are problems in his system. He's trusted a lot of people over the years to make change, to somehow influence what's going on. And Vladimir Putin still today believes that they can win Ukraine. The key, though, is to get the West to believe the myth that Russia is winning. But that just became even harder. As you might have seen, Twitter, also known as X, now has suspended over 800 million accounts in just 1 year. And those accounts were all made by the Russians. What's the most interesting part about that is that this bot network, it was there to amplify narratives. It was there to blur attribution. It was there to coordinate influence, but to make it look organic. But the most important thing is that these bots were not there to just spread propaganda. They're primarily there to make sure that Russia can engage in warfare. Because Russia considers sowing division in the West, causing cracks, leaning on the fissures, as Che Guevara would say. They consider that as a form of warfare. And so now, one of their instruments used for international efforts has now been taken away from them. That is important. That means that today, Russia loses one more tool. But Vladimir Putin perhaps is not aware of the fact that things are going so badly, that there are attacks in Crimea, attacks in Bryansk. We see the Russians be pushed back on the front. We see on the international level that the Russians are being exposed. Look at the expose that just came out citing that, in fact, Russia today is not just smuggling oil through the Baltics, it is putting former Wagner fighters, GRU linked men, which is the military intelligence of Russia, and other security veterans onto the Shadow Fleet. Those tankers are carrying men who are there for intelligence purposes. That's why this has never been just about sanction evasion. This has always been something bigger. Today, we know that the Russians are using their fleet to spy on the West, to attack the West. Now, for Russia, things are complicated because on one side, they don't have the ability to engage in something like satellite intelligence. They have satellites, a limited number, and they won't have any more soon. Their ability to eavesdrop, it's not like the NSA. You can be sure of that. The Russians have a very limited platform where they can work. They must work in the gray zone areas, and that's what they try to do. But right now, they're failing to do it. They're failing time and again. But that's why Putin is probably looking for solutions. He's doing things like firing the Shoigus of this world. He's doing things like Nikolai Patrushev, who he removed from his position. Patrushev is somebody who knew Putin for decades, and the fact that he was removed from his position on the Security Council shows that even the elites close to Putin are no longer secure. That today, things are rough, and Putin is trying to justify this war, trying to show that it's not him who's failing, it's somebody else. Look at the case that we saw at Dmitry Kazak. He was somebody who was close to Putin. He was from St. Petersburg, and he'd been part of the team since at least 1999. But when he had to resign last year, it showed that today, even those close to Putin, those who understood how things work, could no longer trust Putin. But that lack of trust is something that dictators usually do not want to spread. Because when those close to you, those who can actually eject you from power, no longer feel secure, no longer fear they can trust you, that puts your dictatorship into a very dangerous position. Today, we see that for Putin, he's got another problem, though, and that is that the Ukrainians are pushing them back, and they do not have a solution. Financially, they simply cannot afford to do more. But politically, within Russia, people don't want to see a draft in the military. So how can he maintain the lines? How can he make sure that Russia wins? Well, the singular hope is that the West takes the pressure off of Russia, and you can help keep the power on Russia. The way is very simple. Please check out the first pinned comment below and see how you can donate for the Ukrainian soldiers to get what they need to fight and to survive and to win and to come home alive. All donations right now are being matched. Thank you. So when we look at the elites, though, the protection is gone, the system is breaking, and within Putin's elites, you can be sure that they already are thinking, what comes next? Who comes next? Because Putin himself, he's not going to live forever. And as the system starts to crumble, as they start to lose land at the front, as they continually are pushed back for the past few weeks, as there are more attacks within Russia on the infrastructure that makes the regime tenable, you can be sure that Putin is put into a difficult position. But the most important thing is that Vladimir Putin is not losing on one front. Vladimir Putin is losing across all fronts. And the failure is no longer staying at the edge of the system. It is moving towards the center. And the buck stops with Putin. Check out this video and see why. As always, thank you for supporting Ukraine.